That song's a perfect lead into the message this morning, this idea of living that life, and we'll get to that in a second. But can we just thank Ian, Duffy, and Natalie for her first Sunday and leading us in worship this morning. Excited to have her up there. Sorry, this is her least favorite thing when she gets pointed out, so I apologize, but we're really excited. And I know Ian is thrilled to have you on the team, so it's exciting to have you a part of it. In case you don't know, my name's Zach. I'm the youth pastor here at Branchline. Excited to get to speak with you. There's some awe and shock in the crowd. I appreciate the student support being out there. Thanks, guys. But excited to get to speak with you this morning. It's officially October. We've changed the slides over. It's fall. We're ready for it. And for me, nothing screams fall more than, well, our fall festival, of course, but then also an apple orchard. And my wife's family, we take a trip out to an apple orchard every single year, and we were there a couple weeks back. Got a photo of the nieces and nephews, who, of course, came along. But I love apple orchards because it really is the epitome of fall. You got the hay rides, you got bonfires, you got the hay bales you get to climb up, corn mazes, which are my all-time favorite, music, apples, apple cider, all those good things. Do we have that photo of them, the niece and nephew? There it is. There they are. So much fun. But we all decided to play a good game of Duck, Duck, Grey Duck, and you can keep that up there as I'm going to reference it. But, and yes, it is Duck, Duck, Grey Duck, just to make sure we're all on the same page. No Duck, Duck, Goose. But we're playing Duck, Duck, Grey Duck. I get chosen to go first, and so I'm going Duck, 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 and I do Grey Duck on our niece, Audrey, who's the one that has me in the headlock there in the photo. And I'm running around, and, she's fast, guys. And there was also a tree branch she had a duck under, so, I'm going to make my excuses, but she tagged me. And then she goes on to say that I am now in the middle, I am the duck soup, which I'm like, shucks. That means I don't even get to play. I have to sit in the middle and watch, which I didn't really want to do, but those are the rules. That's how it goes. And so I sit in the middle. A few more rounds go by, and our nephew Calvin, who's the one in the middle with the sucker, he gets chosen. He's going around, duck, duck, and he chooses Audrey, which I could have told him, big mistake. He chooses Audrey, and she ends up getting him too, which then she proceeds to tell him, now, Calvin, you're the duck soup. You get to be in the middle. Calvin didn't want to be in the middle. He didn't love that idea, and so he starts reasoning, making some excuses like, hey, maybe we can change up the rules a little bit. Maybe no one has to be the duck soup. But Audrey's like, no, that's the game. Those are the rules. That's how you play. And so Calvin tries another strategy, and he's like, well, you didn't even tag me. I didn't feel it. And so she's like, yeah, I got you. And he's like, no, that was just my shirt. And now there's this back and forth. I got you. No, you didn't. Got your shirt. No, you didn't. And then mom and dad thankfully are like, hey, look, the hayride's back. Distraction. Let's go. But in that moment, Calvin really didn't want to be in the middle. And he was going to reason. He was going to make whatever excuse it took to not be wrong, to not be proven that he actually got tagged, that it hit his shirt. He was going to change the rules, try and convince everyone, whatever it took, that he wasn't going to be wrong in this case. And now we're in a series here called JADED, What's Wrong with the Church Today. And who's the church? Wow, that was the least enthusiastic one I've ever gotten. But it makes sense, and if you're new here, it's a question that we often ask, who is the church? Because I think a lot of times we get stuck in thinking the church is a building, it's this place, but actually the church is you and me. It's all of us coming together. We are the church. But the less enthusiastic response there I kind of get is we're in this series called What's Wrong with the Church, so it's basically what's wrong with us. We don't love talking about what's wrong with us. We don't love talking about our flaws. It's not something that comes naturally. I think sometimes we can kind of be like Calvin and, try and reason, make excuses, be like, hey, maybe we can change up the rules, or let's just sweep it under the rug, like our flaws, our wrongs, they don't actually exist. But that's honestly why when we were all, as the pastors, coming together and talking about how we wanted to kick this fall off, I was so excited when we landed on this series. Because it's only when we actually start acknowledging and taking ownership of where we've gone wrong that I think we can actually begin to change. And so as we as a church actually take ownership, I think that's when we're able to become more and more like Jesus, which is what we're striving to be as we go out into the world. Because I don't think it's news to anyone that the church doesn't necessarily have the greatest reputation of all time, especially with the very people we're trying to reach. People who aren't a part of the church, people who aren't believers, people who don't have a relationship with Jesus often look at the church and they see it as judgmental, hurtful. It's mean. It's just people fighting with one another, which is what we've talked about the last 3 weeks in this series. But I think the name that I hear the most, and I'm sure you've probably heard it as well for the church, is hypocrites. Hypocrites. People who say one thing and then do the exact opposite or do something completely different. And sadly, this isn't a new problem. Or maybe we can take solace in the fact that it's not new. I don't know, whichever way you want to go with that. But it's not a new problem for the church. We can go back throughout church history. We can look at story after story, verse after verse of the church being accused of being hypocrites. In fact, Jesus himself does it. I want to read you one verse here in Matthew chapter 23, verse 27. Jesus says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly, on the outside, you look pretty good. But on the inside, you're full of dead people's bones and all uncleanliness." Just in this one chapter alone, Jesus calls the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the religious leaders, basically the church of the time, he calls them hypocrites 6 different times, along with some other really nice names I'd like to share with you. He calls them sons of hell, blind guides, blind fools, blind men, blind guides again, snakes, brood of vipers. All in this one chapter. Hypocrisy is something Jesus and God takes very seriously. People saying one thing and living different. And it's not new to the church. People have been trying all they can to make themselves look good, showing we follow all the rules to the T, and I'm also going to be the first one to point out when you go wrong and don't follow the rules to the T, trying to cover our flaws, hide our wrongs, to make ourselves look good. The church has been doing this for a long time, and I think we still do this today. In 2022, I believe the church still has struggles with being hypocrites, and I want to share some statistics with you from it's a Christian company called Barna, very reputable. They do a lot of surveys when it comes to the church and Christians and living that way. And the reason I want to share these statistics is not just because I want to nerd out with you. I really do kind of think statistics are fun and surveys, things like that. But I want you to, if you're anything like me, you've maybe grown up in the church, you maybe been in the church for a long time, and so you kind of lose sight of how people outside the church actually see the church. So I want to hopefully shed some light on that today. And so a 2020 study by Barna, so just a couple years ago, showed that 80% of practicing Christians, which they define practicing Christians as anyone who would say that their faith is an important aspect of their life, and they go to church at least once a month. So not super strict guidelines, but 80% of practicing Christians said they have a positive perception of the church. As they look at the church, they're like, 80% is good. Other hand, non-Christians, people not a part of a church, as they look at the church, only 21% would say they have a positive perception of the church. The rest are indifferent or negative. To which you could respond, Zach, of course that's the case. I've had conversations, I've heard the arguments like the church is not of the world. We're in it, but we're not of the world. We're supposed to live countercultural, and so of course the world isn't going to like us. Of course that's going to be the case. It's okay. But it also doesn't even seem like, as we look at some more statistics, that we like the church. Because over the last 20 years, what's been found is in America, the percent of Christians has gone from 45% to 25%. And within that, there's something really interesting. Over the last 20 years, the percentage of Christians that say that reading their Bible and praying is an important part of their faith has stayed pretty consistent, actually. What's seen a significant decrease is church attendance. People actually coming and being part of the church, it's seen as less and less important, less and less valuable. And I think there's reasons for that. I had a good friend in college who, ironically, his name is Christian, but he didn't have a relationship with Jesus at the time, but we were going over to a friend's for a game night, and he had asked me for a ride. And so we're driving over there and just kind of having conversation. He asked me what I'd been up to, and so I shared the church I was a part of back in college. I'd done this really cool event, and so I was saying how fun it was and a great time, and I had this bright idea. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my chance to be a good Christian. I'm going to invite Christian to church. It's going to be great. And so very casually, I'm like, hey, Christian, would you ever want to come on a Sunday? Like, no pressure. And I could see a little uncertainty, a little uneasiness, and he was like, a little hesitant. And so as friends, I'm like, hey, you can tell me, like, I'm sensing a little hesitancy. Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Just tell me. Do you not want to come? And he proceeds to share that he grew up in the church. He and his family had gone gone to church most of the years of his life, but they'd kind of gotten burned. And it was for many of the same things that we've talked about throughout this series. They'd been judged, they'd been hurt. All they saw was a bunch of people fighting. But the thing that he said next is what stuck with me, and that whole game night I really couldn't focus. That's my excuse for losing all the games. But his next statement kept ringing in my ears because he then went on to say that he wished the church looked more like Jesus. He wished the church looked more like Jesus. Because like I said, he grew up going to church, reading his Bible. He knew the stories, and the Jesus he read about, he went on to say, seemed a lot different than the church today. And if that doesn't rock you, if that doesn't make you at least a little bit concerned about the church, I don't know what will. Because we say like, hey, we're going to go live like Jesus. We're going to go share who Jesus is. But if the outside perception is people wishing we looked more like Jesus, it seems like we're missing something there. There's another study done back in 2013 called Are Christians Hypocrites? Pretty straightforward. But in this study, they wanted to see if people were more like Jesus or more like the Pharisees, the ones Jesus had talked about in that verse from Matthew. And so they had a number of statements describing a characteristic of Jesus or a characteristic of the Pharisee. It was things like, I personally spend time with non-believers to help them follow Jesus, or it's not my responsibility to help people who won't help themselves. And then people on a scale of 1 to 4 had to say that doesn't describe me at all or totally describes me. I calculated all the results, and what they found was that 51% of people were more like Pharisees. 51% of people acted and thought more like Pharisees, and only 14% acted and thought more like Jesus, with the rest of the people somewhere in the middle. 51%. One last statistic, then I promise I'm done. But in that same 2020 study I referenced earlier, 84% of non-believers said they personally knew a Christian. Whether it was a friend, family member, 84% of people said they personally knew a Christian. But the jaw-dropping thing was only 15% said their lifestyles, of those Christians they knew, those Christians' lifestyles were noticeably different than anyone else's. Within this room, that's about 10 of you, because of your faith, actually live a noticeably different life. The rest of us, we just blend in with everyone else. Our Monday through Saturday is no different. There's an eye-opening quote that the Barna CEO, David Kinnaman, he wrote a book basically kind of combining all these statistics, what he learned from this, and he says this: many Christians are more concerned with what they call unrighteousness than they are with self-righteousness. Because it's a lot easier to point fingers at how the culture is immoral than it is to confront Christians and our comfortable spiritual patterns. And it all brings me back to that statement Christian said. I wish the church was more like Jesus. And so what's wrong with the church today? If you haven't figured out what we're going to focus on today, it's hypocrisy. It's hypocrisy. And I'm just as included in this. I'm not just saying, hey, you guys got to figure life out. Like, that would be the biggest hypocrite up on stage if I'm up here saying, hey, you guys got to get this figured out. I'm just as a part of this as anyone. But I believe in 2022, the big hypocrisy for the church is that we go around saying that Jesus changes your life. You've heard that. You've probably said that Jesus changes your life. But the big hypocrisy is that we say that, but then we ourselves live an unchanged life. I wish the church looked more like Jesus. The outside perception of the church, as I was looking at all these statistics, it seems the outside perception is that church is just our thing. It's just what we like to do on Sunday mornings. We like to gather, we like to come together, sing some songs, hear a message, maybe be encouraged. Like, that's just our thing. And other people would be like, I like sleeping in. I like hanging out with friends. I like getting stuff done around the house. I like this or that. That church thing, that's just your thing. Enjoy it. Have fun. That's great. And the statistics do kind of show that. It just is our thing because our Monday through Saturday really isn't any different. Only 15% of us live a noticeably different life. And so we say that Jesus changes our lives, and yet we live in a way that isn't noticeably different than those who don't have a relationship with Jesus. But when I open my Bible, guys, when I look at this and I read stories about the disciples, and more importantly, when I read stories about Jesus, I see someone who actually lived different. I see someone that changed the way that people looked at themselves, that changed the way people looked at the world around them. Like Jesus, people wanted to get to know him. They wanted to know what made him different. And they thought maybe this Jesus guy could even change my life too. I believe Jesus came to confront comfortable. He came to confront those comfortable spiritual patterns that David Kinnaman talked about, which is tough though, because if you're anything like me, I like comfortable. Comfortable's kind of nice. I like getting home from work, sitting in my favorite chair, in the couch, just watching a show, zoning out. That's nice. I like my kind of predictable routine of life. I like sleeping in as late as I want. I like the people I hang out with. Do I really have to join a small group? Do I really have to get to know other people? That's awkward. I like my little town. Do I really need to cross the bridge? Do I really need to go experience other things? Like, it's comfortable here. I like my Roomba vacuum that vacuums my house for me, so I don't have to go around with a vacuum. It's nice, guys. And at this point, you might be thinking, like, not only is that kind of stuck and comfortable, he's also a little lazy, which maybe, but it's really cool. Like, the vacuum goes, and it senses the wall, and it turns, and then the couch, and off topic. But I really like my Roomba. But I'm willing to bet, you guys, it's not in my notes, but I'm willing to bet that you guys also like being comfortable. You also don't mind that favorite chair. And so why would Jesus come to confront comfortable? I think it's because Jesus knows a comfortable life isn't a changed life. And, I'm willing to say that I think Satan uses comfortable as one of his biggest weapons. I think we often think that Satan's going to come in with guns a-blazing, big, awful, terrible, fire, like this awful, crazy thing, which maybe sometimes. But isn't it true that often at our lowest points and when we're going through difficulties, when we're willing to change the most, when we look to God the most, is in those low places? I think Satan knows that. And Satan knows that if he can keep us in a comfortable life isn't a changed life. And this is where we as a church get stuck sometimes. This is why people look at the church and see hypocrites. People who talk all about how Jesus changes their life, but then they don't live changed lives. We need to start living in a way that shows Jesus actually changes our lives and not just say he does. And so today I want to give us 2 steps, not even 3 things today, just 2 steps to hopefully live change, like actually remember to live change when we often get stuck in these routines and are comfortable. 2 steps to hopefully live that changed life. And so we're going to start by looking at the letter written by James. In James chapter 1, verse 22 through 24, he says this: "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourself. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but doesn't do what it says is like someone who looks at their face in a mirror and after looking at themselves goes away and immediately forgets what they look like." How many people have heard the word disciple before? Maybe if you've been a part of the church long enough, if you watch Karate Kid, if you've read your Bible, whatever it might be, you've probably heard the word disciple. And it basically is kind of like a student. Someone who learns from a teacher, who listens, but it's also expected that the disciple will then act and live out what they are being taught and what they're learning. And so what's really awesome, congratulations to you all, you are disciples. If you have a relationship with Jesus, you're his disciple. And so as he's going around sharing who God is and how God could change people's lives, he's not looking for an audience. As Jesus was going around sharing messages, people would come and hear him speak. He wasn't looking for people to be like, "Wow, that was awesome. What a great message. See you next week." No. Jesus was looking for disciples, people who would listen, learn, and go live out what was shared. This is what James is getting at in verse 22 again. He says, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourself. Do what it says." Actually do it. You've heard the word on a Sunday, you've read your Bible, actually live it out. And James goes on to make an interesting metaphor about a mirror. Verse 23 to 24, he says, "Anyone who listens to the word but doesn't do what it says is like someone who looks at their face in a mirror, and after looking at themselves goes away and immediately forgets what they look like." First step, living a changed life, check your mirror. Check your mirror. Now, I had to steal this because this isn't my mirror. This is my wife Maddie's mirror, but she let me have it for the day. It took a little bit of convincing, but she let me borrow it. But the first step is check your mirror. Because what are mirrors used for? They're used to check your reflection, to see what you look like, see if you're ready to go out for the day, straighten your hair, straighten the tie, check the nose hairs, put the makeup on, clean breakfast off your face. You check your mirror to make sure you're ready to head out. Unless you work from home. Then you get to wear your PJs all day, which is really, really cool. That would be awesome. But most of us, we have to check our mirror before we head out for the day. And so James is saying this is what we need to do when it comes to living out our faith, our relationship with Jesus. To actually live a changed life, we need to check our mirrors, meaning we need to remind ourselves of what a changed life looks like. Being honest with ourselves and seeing if we're really looking to live a changed life or if we're stuck in the comfortable. Because how many of you have heard a great message, an awesome message? You have this awesome worship experience, this incredible encounter with God, and you're like, holy smokes, this is amazing. I'm going to live change. I'm going to serve more. I'm going to go out and be a better person. I'm going to be kinder. I'm going to pray more. I'm going to read my Bible more. I'm going to forgive that person I've been resenting. I'm going to mend broken relationships. I cannot wait for tomorrow to live this changed life. And then Monday comes, and then Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday. But then Sunday comes again and you get psyched and it's like, oh, what a great message. Jesus, I'm going to go out, I'm going to live different, it's going to be incredible. And then Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. And we just get stuck in this cycle of wanting to live changed. But then as James says, we walk away, we walk out those doors, we wake up the next morning and we forgot what we even wanted to do. We forget about this changed life. And we just get stuck back in our comfortable routine. We can't have Sundays be the only day we check our mirrors. To be reminded of what a changed life with Jesus looks like. We need to be praying. We actually have to be talking with God throughout the week, asking for opportunities to share who Jesus is. And then to actually act on those opportunities. We need to be reading our Bibles, getting into God's Word, getting guidance in how to live, looking at Jesus' example. We need to be the church outside Sunday, meaning we're encouraging, supporting one another, reaching out, and yes, even at times reminding, challenging, however you want to put it, people to check your mirrors. Like, hey, Andrew, you said you wanted to do this awesome thing. I'm not necessarily seeing it, which isn't true. Andrew's awesome. He lives it out. But we got to be the church outside Sunday. We got to be the church outside Sunday, encouraging one another, looking out for one another. We need to be checking our mirrors. Second step, we're going to go look at James again, and this time in chapter 2, verses 14 to 17. James says this, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by actions, is dead." James believed it was impossible to have true faith in God and not have that faith be seen in your works, in the way you lived. And I want to make it clear, James, myself, Branchline, we don't believe work saves you. That's by God's grace alone. But what James is saying is that if we truly say our lives have been changed by Jesus, it should show. Simply put, if our lives are changed, the way we live should reflect that. The trouble is, and what James is saying is that so often, we're just bless you, Christians. Just bless you, Christians. Again, verse 15 says, "Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? If I sneeze, what's the usual response? Bless you. Look at you, all nice, polite people. That's the right thing. You say, 'Bless you,' when I sneeze. The trouble is, this is the same approach we have when we see other people's struggles, when we see other people going through difficult times, is we say, 'I'll pray for you.' We say best wishes, or as James says, Go. I hope you're able to find food, shelter, clothing so you can survive. Blessings. And we leave it there. And I'm not saying prayer is bad. Prayer should be our starting point every time. But prayer isn't meant to just be the starting and end point. There's steps along the way that we can take. Like, God actually may want you to be the answer to the prayers. That neighbor, that family that you've seen struggle to put food on their plates, that you've been praying for, that God provides, maybe you could be the one to help out. That friend that's been struggling in depression, that feels like no one's on their side, that just wants to know that someone cares about them, that you've been praying, I hope someone comes along their path. God, show them that they're valuable. Maybe that's you. Maybe you get to be that answer to prayer. We're meant to go beyond just being, bless you, Christians. We have a partnership here at Branchline with the Grace Project. Awesome ministry that provides for the needs of the homeless in the metro area. And each month we do a collection, as Pastor Andrew shared, whether it's bedding, clothing items, different things like that. And what if we just said to the Grace Project, hey, we'll be praying for you guys? I'm sure they'd appreciate it. I'm sure they'd take those prayers, but they're probably going to go looking elsewhere for a church, for people that'll actually provide and bring those needs. And I think this is what happens sometimes with the world and the church, is people might take a chance, step into a church, ask, hey, I'm struggling. I need help. I'm looking for support. And we as a church, we just say, blessings. I hope you find what you're looking for. I'll pray for you. But we don't ever step up to actually provide for the needs. We don't actually show them how Jesus can change their lives. And so, naturally, they leave and they look elsewhere for someone or something that will help provide for them. A living faith, guys, is a real faith. If we truly believe in something, we will act on it. I'm a big Vikings fan, guys. If you didn't know that, I'm a big Vikings fan. Like, the only reason I miss a game is if I'm speaking on a Sunday and they play in London, which is apparently right now. Couldn't take this one off. But I love the Vikings. Love them. And some might say I have too much faith in the Vikings, where I believe that if I'm not wearing my jersey, that's an automatic loss for them because I didn't do my part. I didn't carry my weight. Now, I'm not wearing my jersey right now, but you better believe I got my Viking socks on. I'm ready. Thank you. Wow. But you better believe that I think I'm going to make a difference with that. And if the game's not going well, I will change seats because I need to help contribute to the changing the vibes, the good atmosphere that I'm sending their way. And you know that saying that this is our year? That's a thing because I keep it going. This is our year, guys, and I will tell you why it's our year. But more seriously, gotta transition now, transitions. Well, that's good. I'm not gonna lie, I do have a recording at home. I was hoping to find out nothing, but that's better news than it could have been, so it's fine. Transition. On a more serious note, as a youth pastor, as someone who believes in middle school, high school students, and that God has a big plan for our middle school and high school students, it breaks my heart that they're the fastest generation falling away from faith or not even being introduced to faith in the first place. And so that's why I'm so grateful to have a team of people that believe in students as well, that go to students' games, concerts, plays, to show students that we care about their life and we don't just expect them to come to our things. That I have a team of people that encourage, write letters, that reach out to students to let them know that they're thinking about them, that we see them. And we strive to create a space on Wednesdays where they can come, have fun, experience Jesus, and be with people who love them, care about them, and want to help them through life. If we truly believe in something, if we truly have a living and real faith, we act on it. Which leads to our second step in living change. Check your fruit. I should have brought an apple or something, but check your fruit. This is the second step. Check your fruit. Branchline, it's founded on John 15. John 15:5 says this. Jesus says, I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Fruit is referenced time and time again in the Bible, and are our lives reflecting his? Are we showing the characteristics of Jesus, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control? Because throughout the Bible, fruit's referenced time and time again. And Jesus even says in Matthew that you will know a person's character. You will know if they truly are following me based on their fruit. As you look at someone's life, you can know who they follow, what they value. And so that's why the second step is for living change is check your fruit. We should hopefully be seeing fruit in the first place. Like if you're not seeing any fruit in your life, like probably answer that, hey, something needs to be changed. But then as we look at our lives, are we reflecting Jesus? Are we seeing people come together? People being united, people feeling loved, growing in their faith, needs actually being provided for? Or as we look at our life, are we seeing a wake of people? Are we seeing people hurt, judged, turned away, unforgiven, ignored, forgotten? When you check your fruit, is it more like the Pharisees who say, bless you, go in peace, hope things work out for you? You're the first one to point out where things have gone wrong. You're so focused on where everyone else, the culture is immoral, than you are living a life like Jesus, where you're stepping into the challenge, stepping into the difficult situations, looking to be answers to prayer, actually getting out of the comfortable, and really living a changed life. Check your fruit. Now, 2 steps. Check your mirror, check your fruit. Check your mirror, check your fruit. Check your mirror, check your fruit, check your mirror, check your fruit. I want this to be stuck in your guys' head. Because like I said, I don't want this just to be a Sunday message. I hope this gets stuck in your head Monday through Saturday this week. And I have a challenge for you guys. Because I believe that if we actually remember this, if we actually seek to live out change, it will change everything. And so my challenge for you guys is every time, and I know this is probably a lot for some of you, including me, every time you check yourself in a mirror, I want you to say, live changed. Out loud. As weird as you might sound, doesn't mean you have to like scream it at the mirror if you're like in a public restroom or something. Like, don't need to be weird. We don't need to be the weird Christians. But I want to challenge you just as a reminder to yourself, live changed. Live changed. Live changed. Check your mirror. Check your fruit. Because I believe if we do this, if we actually begin to live the changed life we talk about, instead of the church being looked at as a bunch of hypocrites, instead of leaving people wishing the church looked more like Jesus, instead of people seeing no real difference in the way we live, I believe people will actually start to see Jesus. We'll start to see how Jesus can actually change their lives. And instead of church just being our thing, it might start to become something that people want to know more about, something people will want to be a part of. But it starts with us being willing to acknowledge where we've gone wrong. It starts with us being willing to get out of the comfortable. And it starts with us being willing to check our mirrors and check our fruit. Check our mirrors, check our fruit each day. Get in the Word. Pray. Let's be the church to one another, supporting, reminding each other of the difference that Jesus says we can make in him and through him. This is the end of me talking. But this isn't the end of the message, guys. There's a Monday through Saturday still to be lived out. Check your mirror. Check your fruit. Let's live changed. If you'll pray with me. Lord God, we thank you for being good. God, we want to seek you, seek to live more like Jesus. You say we're your disciples, we're your students. We get to live out what you teach. That what an honor it is that you want to use us to make a difference in people's lives. Let us be answers to prayer, God. Let us remember to stop, pause, take a look at our lives to help remind one another, support one another that you want us to live changed. Help us remember this week to check our mirrors, to check our fruit, and actually live the changed life that we so often say you give us. Give us courage, give us boldness. We love you, God. We thank you for who you are. We pray all this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Awesome. We'll continue this series next week, but until then, guys, you already know. check your mirror, check your fruit, live change. We'll see you next week.